The evening began like any other in the old cafe tucked between narrow streets and glowing shop signs. The place had been there for decades, known for its strong tea, quiet corners, and the soft hum of conversations that never rushed. Wooden tables carried marks of time, and the air smelled of cardamom and fresh bread. People came here to rest after long days, not knowing that this ordinary space was about to witness something unforgettable. Outside, traffic moved slowly. Inside, the cafe felt calm. A small group of well-dressed men sat near the center, speaking in low voices. Their posture and confidence made it clear they were educated and respected. They had been invited for a private gathering, though the reason had not been fully explained. Each of them was known in academic circles for their deep knowledge of Arabic language and literature. They believed this evening would be another chance to show their expertise. At a corner table sat a man who did not draw attention. He wore simple clothes, nothing expensive or eye-catching. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his posture relaxed. Anyone looking at him would assume he was just another quiet customer enjoying the evening. No one recognized him as one of the most powerful tycoons in the region, a man whose decisions shaped businesses, schools, and communities. He preferred it this way. Silence often revealed more than loud introductions. He ordered tea and watched the room. His eyes moved slowly, observing how people spoke, how they listened, and how they treated those around them. For him, understanding people mattered more than being recognized. Tonight was not about status. It was about truth. Moving between tables was a young waitress. She wore a simple uniform and carried herself with calm focus. Her steps were light, her voice polite. She had worked here for a long time and knew the rhythm of the cafe well. She greeted customers with respect and listened carefully to their requests. To most people, she was invisible, just part of the background of the cafe. But she noticed everything. She noticed how the group of experts spoke with confidence, sometimes too much confidence. She noticed how the quiet man in the corner listened more than he spoke. She noticed the pauses between words, the way some people spoke to impress rather than to explain. These things mattered to her, though she never said anything. The cafe owner had closed the back section for the gathering. He had been told that an important guest would arrive, but even he did not know who. He trusted the instructions and ensured everything was prepared properly. Fresh tea was served, lights were adjusted, and the noise was kept low. As the experts settled into their seats, they discussed language, history, and culture. Their words were polished and formal. They quoted old texts and famous scholars. Each tried to sound more insightful than the other. Their voices carried pride, not cruelty, but certainty. They believed knowledge lived only in books and lecture halls. The quiet man listened without interruption. He sipped his tea slowly. His face showed no emotion, but his mind was active. He had met many educated people in his life, many with impressive titles. Yet he had also learned that true understanding often lived outside classrooms. This belief had guided him for years. The waitress approached the table to refill cups. She heard fragments of the conversation but did not linger. Still, something about their discussion caught her attention. They spoke of a phrase, an old one, rich with meaning. They debated its roots and structure, but something felt missing. She felt it in her chest, the way one feels when a story is told without its heart. She returned to the counter, her hands busy but her mind thoughtful. She remembered hearing similar words when she was younger, spoken by elders during long evenings at home. Those words were not explained with books. They were explained with stories, actions, and lessons tied to life itself. Meanwhile, the cafe door opened again. A gentle hush fell over the room as another man entered. He walked directly to the quiet customer in the corner and greeted him with deep respect. That simple gesture changed everything. The room grew silent. The quiet man stood. His presence shifted the air. He spoke calmly, his voice steady and clear. He introduced himself not with pride, but with honesty. He revealed that he was the one who had invited the experts. He explained that this gathering was not about praise or competition. It was a test, but not the kind they expected. The experts straightened in their seats, surprised and slightly uneasy. They had heard of this man, but none had seen him in person. His reputation was known across the region, not just for wealth, but for wisdom and fairness. He spoke of language as a living thing, something that belonged to people, not just institutions. He explained that he wanted to understand how knowledge was being preserved and passed down. He believed that words carried responsibility. He wanted to see who truly understood their meaning, not just their structure. The experts nodded confidently. They were ready. The waitress stood behind the counter, listening quietly. She felt a strange tension in the room, like the moment before a storm. She did not know why her heart beat faster, only that something important was happening. The tycoon looked around the room, then toward the group of experts. He told them that soon he would ask a question. A simple one, yet deep. He reminded them that this was not about embarrassment or pride. It was about truth. The cafe felt smaller now, the walls holding their breath. The waitress picked up a tray and walked slowly toward the tables, unaware that her life, like everyone else's in that room, was about to change. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds after the tycoon finished speaking. The experts exchanged quick glances, each one trying to read the mood. Confidence still sat on their faces, but now it was mixed with curiosity. They leaned forward slightly, ready to prove themselves. The tycoon reached into his coat and took out a small folded paper. It looked old, the edges worn soft, like it had been handled many times. He placed it gently on the table, as if it mattered more than it appeared. Everyone watched closely. He explained that the paper held a single Arabic phrase, a short line, yet filled with layers of meaning. He said the phrase had been used long ago, not only in books but in daily life. It carried wisdom, guidance, and emotion. His voice remained calm, but his eyes were sharp, watching every reaction. He asked the first expert to explain the phrase. The man cleared his throat and began speaking with confidence. He talked about grammar, sentence structure, and historical roots. His words were smooth and practiced. He spoke for several minutes using complex terms and references. When he finished, he sat back, clearly satisfied. The tycoon nodded politely but did not smile. The second expert was invited to speak. He gave a different explanation, focusing on poetry and classical usage. He quoted famous lines and scholars. His voice rose with pride as he spoke, certain his answer was strong. Again, the tycoon listened carefully, then simply thanked him. One by one, more experts spoke. Each answer sounded intelligent. Each was filled with knowledge. Some focused on history, others on religion, others on literature. The explanations were long and detailed. The room slowly filled with words, yet something still felt empty. The waitress moved quietly between tables, serving tea and refilling cups. She kept her eyes lowered, as expected, but her ears were open. With every answer, her brow tightened slightly. She felt the same feeling again, stronger this time. Something was missing. She remembered hearing the same phrase when she was younger. It was spoken during difficult moments, when someone was struggling or afraid. It was never explained with rules or books. It was explained with care, with stories of patience, humility, and responsibility. The phrase was not just language. It was guidance. At the table, the experts continued. Some corrected each other politely. Some tried to sound deeper than the last. A few even repeated similar points, just using different words. Time passed, and empty cups gathered on the table. The tycoon remained silent throughout. He did not interrupt. He did not argue, but his expression slowly changed. The calm interest in his eyes was now mixed with disappointment. Not anger, just quiet concern. After several experts had spoken, he raised his hand gently. The room fell silent again. He thanked them for their effort. He said their knowledge was impressive and their education clear. But then he asked a simple question. He asked how many of them had heard this phrase spoken in their own homes, not in books but in real life. The room stayed quiet. A few experts shifted in their seats. One or two nodded slightly, but no one spoke. The tycoon leaned back and sighed softly. He said language was not meant to live only on pages. It was meant to guide people, comfort them, and remind them of values. He said knowing the shape of words was not the same as understanding their soul. The experts listened, some confused, some thoughtful. The waitress stood near the counter holding a tray. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She felt torn. A part of her wanted to stay silent, to remain invisible as always. Another part felt heavy, like holding a truth and refusing to share it. She remembered her grandparents' voices, calm and firm, explaining life through simple words. She remembered mistakes, lessons, and forgiveness. The phrase on that paper was tied to all of that. It was not complicated to her. It was clear. At the table, the tycoon asked if anyone wished to add something more. The experts looked at each other. No one spoke. They had already said everything they knew. The silence stretched. The waitress took a small step forward without realizing it. She stopped herself, feeling her face warm. She looked around. No one was looking at her. The experts were focused on the tycoon. The cafe owner was busy near the door. She took a breath. In a soft voice, barely louder than the clink of cups, she asked if she could say something. The sound surprised everyone. Heads turned slowly toward her. The experts looked confused. Some looked amused. A waitress speaking during a scholarly discussion was unexpected. The tycoon turned and looked at her. His eyes did not show judgment, only curiosity. He asked her to speak. The waitress swallowed and nodded. She did not step closer to the table. She stayed where she was, respectful and calm. She said she was not educated like the others. She said she did not know grammar rules or historical dates. But she had heard that phrase many times in her life. The room was completely silent now. She began to explain what the phrase meant to her. She spoke simply, using everyday words. She explained how it was used during hard times, how it reminded people to stay patient, to act with honor even when no one was watching. She spoke of responsibility not as a burden but as a form of care. As she spoke, the experts' expressions slowly changed. Some frowned. Some leaned forward. Laughter faded. Curiosity replaced it. The tycoon did not interrupt. He listened closely, his attention fully on her. When she finished, she lowered her eyes, unsure if she had overstepped. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed the tray down. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then the tycoon smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one. He thanked her. The experts sat frozen, unsure of what had just happened. The answer they had all missed had been spoken in simple words, without pride, without effort. The test was no longer about language. It was about understanding. And everyone in the room knew that something had just changed. The smile on the tycoon's face did not fade quickly. It stayed there, calm and thoughtful, as he looked from the waitress to the group of experts. No one spoke. The cafe felt different now, as if the air itself had shifted. A moment earlier, the room was filled with confident voices. Now it was filled with reflection. The waitress stood still, unsure what to do next. She felt exposed, like she had stepped into a space she did not belong. Her heart beat fast, and she kept her eyes lowered, waiting for a response that could go either way. She was ready to apologize if needed. She had not planned to speak. The words had simply come out. The tycoon broke the silence by thanking her again. He asked her to repeat one part of her explanation, slowly. She hesitated, then did so, choosing her words carefully. She spoke the same way she always had, without decoration or drama, just truth as she understood it. As she spoke, one of the experts shifted in his seat. Another crossed his arms, then slowly relaxed them. A third looked down at the paper on the table, as if seeing it for the first time. Their faces showed something rare, uncertainty. The tycoon turned to the experts and asked them what they thought of her explanation. First, no one answered. Then one of them spoke. His voice was quieter than before. He said her interpretation was not incorrect. In fact, it matched the purpose of the phrase more closely than expected. He admitted that while his own answer was technically sound, it lacked the human side. Another expert followed. He said language often loses its meaning when it is separated from people. He said the waitress's explanation reminded him of why the phrase existed in the first place. His voice carried humility, something that had not been there earlier. Not all the experts reacted the same way. A few remained silent, their faces unreadable. Pride does not fade easily. Still, no one laughed now. No one dismissed her words. The tycoon listened to each response, then nodded. He said this was exactly why he created the test. He said the world was full of people who knew many words but understood very little. He said wisdom was not owned by classrooms or titles. It was earned through life, listening, and experience. He then asked the waitress a question. He asked her where she learned such understanding. She lifted her eyes for the first time and spoke of her home. She spoke of elders who believed lessons should be lived, not memorized. She spoke of evenings filled with stories, not lectures. She spoke of mistakes and forgiveness, and how words guided behavior, not just thought. The cafe owner stood quietly nearby, listening with wide eyes. He had known the waitress for years but had never heard her speak like this. He felt a strange mix of pride and surprise. The tycoon asked the waitress if she enjoyed learning. She nodded. She said she loved listening, observing, and remembering. She said she never had the chance to study formally, but she always paid attention. Knowledge to her was everywhere. The tycoon smiled again. He said attention was the first step toward wisdom. He then turned back to the experts and asked them a final question. He asked them why none of them had spoken about how the phrase was used to guide behavior, not just explain meaning. He asked why no one mentioned how it shaped character. One expert answered honestly. He said they were trained to analyze, not to feel. Another said they were taught to impress, not to connect. A third said they had forgotten how language lived among ordinary people. The room was quiet again, but this time it felt peaceful, not tense. The tycoon folded the paper carefully and placed it back in his coat. He said the test was over. He said the goal was never to find the smartest person in the room. It was to find understanding that could be shared. He then did something unexpected. He invited the waitress to sit at the table. Gasps filled the room. She froze. Sitting with scholars and powerful figures was unthinkable for someone like her. She looked at the cafe owner, unsure. He nodded gently, encouraging her. With slow steps, she approached the table and sat at the edge, hands folded tightly in her lap. She felt every eye on her. Yet the tycoon treated her no differently than the others. He poured tea into her cup himself, a gesture that left everyone stunned. He asked her more questions, not to test her, but to understand her perspective. He asked how people in her community used words to teach values. She answered honestly, sometimes pausing to find the right words. She never pretended to know more than she did. The experts listened. Some asked questions of their own, not with challenge but with curiosity. A real conversation began, one that had been missing earlier. It was slower, quieter, and far more meaningful. The waitress slowly relaxed. Her voice grew steadier. She realized she was not being judged. She was being heard. The tycoon watched this closely. This was what he had hoped for. A space where learning flowed both ways. As time passed, the cafe lights dimmed slightly. Outside, the city continued its noise, unaware of the quiet lesson unfolding inside. The tycoon stood once more and thanked everyone for their honesty. He said tonight reminded him that leadership meant listening to those who were often ignored. He looked at the waitress and told her she had given everyone something valuable. Not an answer, but a reminder. She felt tears rise but held them back. She nodded, unable to find words. As the gathering began to end, the experts stood and prepared to leave. Several of them approached the waitress quietly. They thanked her. One apologized for underestimating her. Another said he would remember her words. When the cafe returned to its usual rhythm, the waitress went back behind the counter. She felt different, lighter, yet uncertain. She wondered if she had crossed a line or changed something she did not understand yet. The tycoon approached the counter before leaving. He thanked her once more and told her that understanding like hers should never be hidden. He said this was not the end of the conversation, but the beginning of something greater. She watched him walk out into the night, still not fully grasping what had happened. But deep inside, she knew her life had quietly shifted, and so had everyone else's. The cafe slowly returned to its usual pace after the gathering ended. Chairs were moved back into place, empty cups cleared, and the soft background noise returned. Yet for the waitress, nothing felt the same. Her hands moved as they always had, wiping tables and carrying trays, but her thoughts were far away. The quiet moment she had shared with the tycoon stayed in her mind, replaying again and again. Customers came and went, unaware of what had happened earlier. To them, it was just another cafe on another night. But to her, the walls felt different, as if they had witnessed something important and were holding on to it. The cafe owner noticed her silence. He asked if she was all right. She nodded and smiled, not trusting her voice yet. She did not know how to explain what she felt. It was not pride. It was not fear. It was something deeper, like a door opening inside her that she had never noticed before. That night, when the cafe finally closed, she walked home under dim streetlights. The city felt quieter than usual. Her steps were slow, her thoughts heavy. She wondered if she had said too much. She wondered if she had embarrassed herself. Yet she also felt a strange sense of peace. She had spoken honestly without trying to be someone else. At home, she sat alone with a cup of tea, staring at the steam rising slowly. She remembered the tycoon's words about understanding not being hidden. She had heard many important people speak before, but none had spoken to her like that. Not as someone below them, but as someone worth listening to. The next few days passed quietly. The cafe stayed busy. Life continued. No one mentioned the gathering. The experts did not return. The tycoon did not appear. Slowly, she began to wonder if it had all been a strange moment that would fade away. Then, one afternoon, a man entered the cafe asking for her. The cafe owner called her name, surprised. She wiped her hands and stepped forward. The man introduced himself politely and handed her a sealed envelope. He said it was from the tycoon and left without waiting. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it. Inside was a simple note. The words were short and clear. The tycoon thanked her again for her honesty and courage. He wrote that he believed understanding like hers should be nurtured. He invited her to attend a small discussion group, not as a worker, but as a participant. No pressure. No obligation. She read the note 3 times. That evening, she sat quietly, thinking. She had never been invited to such a place. The idea frightened her. She worried she would not belong. She worried people would look down on her again. But she also remembered the moment at the table, when her words mattered. After a long pause, she folded the note carefully and decided to go. The meeting was held in a modest building, not grand or intimidating. When she arrived, her heart raced. She almost turned back, but she took a breath and stepped inside. The room was simple. A few chairs, a table, and people from different walks of life. Some were teachers. Some were students. Some were workers like her. The tycoon was there, dressed simply, greeting everyone with the same respect. He welcomed her warmly and invited her to sit anywhere she liked. The discussion that followed felt different from anything she had known. No one tried to impress. No one competed. People spoke honestly about language, values, and how words shaped behavior. When she spoke, others listened. When she stayed silent, no one pushed her. For the first time, she felt like her thoughts belonged in the room. Over the following weeks, she attended more meetings. Sometimes she spoke. Sometimes she just listened. Slowly, her confidence grew. She realized that learning did not always mean studying from books. It meant being present, asking questions, and reflecting. The tycoon watched her progress quietly. He never praised her loudly. He never made her feel special in front of others. He simply gave her space to grow. One day, after a session ended, he spoke to her privately. He asked her if she had ever considered formal learning. She laughed softly and said she never thought it was for someone like her. He replied that learning belonged to anyone willing to approach it with humility. He offered to help her continue her education in a way that suited her pace. No pressure. No expectations. Just opportunity. She felt overwhelmed. Tears filled her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She thanked him and said she needed time to think. He nodded, understanding. At the cafe, her coworkers noticed changes. She listened more deeply. She spoke with more calm. Customers often found themselves staying longer, drawn into thoughtful conversations with her. She never preached. She never showed off. She simply shared what she understood, when asked. Some nights, she thought about the experts from that first evening. She wondered if they had changed too. She hoped they had. The cafe owner watched her with quiet pride. He had always known she was thoughtful, but now he saw her confidence bloom. He encouraged her, reminding her that growth did not mean leaving who she was behind. As time passed, word of the discussion group spread. More people joined. The space grew richer, filled with voices that had once been unheard. The tycoon rarely spoke at length. He preferred to listen, guiding only when needed. One evening, during a discussion, someone asked the waitress what she had learned from all of this. She thought for a moment before answering. She said she learned that understanding was not about being right. It was about being real, about letting words guide actions, not egos. The room grew quiet, not from tension, but from agreement. The tycoon smiled softly. That night, as she walked home, she realized something important. Her life had not changed because someone powerful noticed her. It had changed because she allowed herself to speak honestly when it mattered. And that understanding, once shared, had begun to ripple outward, quietly touching lives she might never fully know. The months that followed felt steady, not rushed, yet full. The waitress continued working at the cafe, waking early, tying her apron, and greeting familiar faces. On the surface, her life looked the same, but inside, everything had shifted. She listened more closely to people now, not just to their words, but to what they meant. Every conversation felt like a chance to learn something new. She began attending learning sessions regularly. Some were small, some larger. People came from different backgrounds, carrying different stories. No one introduced themselves with titles. They spoke as people, not positions. That made all the difference. She still felt nervous sometimes, especially when she spoke in front of others. But she no longer felt small. She understood that her value did not come from education papers or status. It came from honesty and experience. That understanding gave her quiet strength. The tycoon stayed present but never controlling. He checked in from time to time, asking how she felt, not what she had achieved. When she doubted herself, he reminded her that growth was not a straight path. He often said that silence, when chosen with care, could be just as powerful as speech. One evening, after a long discussion, he asked her to walk with him outside. The city lights glowed softly around them. He told her that the first night in the cafe had stayed with him. He said he had tested many people in his life, but that moment reminded him why he still believed in listening. He told her something he had never said publicly. He said he once believed success meant being the smartest voice in the room. Over time, life taught him otherwise. Real leadership, he learned, was about making space for voices that were never invited. She listened quietly, moved by his honesty. He then told her that he wanted to start a small program. Not an institution, not a grand project. Just a space where people like her could learn, speak, and grow without fear. He asked her if she would help guide it, not as a teacher, but as a voice that reminded everyone why the space existed. She felt the weight of the request. Scared her. She told him she was not ready. He smiled and said readiness was not a requirement. Willingness was. After many nights of thought, she agreed. The program began quietly. No announcements. No media. Just a few people gathered in a simple room. She shared stories, not lessons. She encouraged others to speak, especially those who usually stayed silent. Slowly, trust grew. People began to change in small ways. A young worker spoke up for the first time. An older man admitted he had been wrong about something for years. A student realized learning did not mean competing. None of these moments were dramatic, but they were real. The waitress often returned home exhausted but fulfilled. She still worked at the cafe, choosing not to leave it behind. Kept her grounded. It reminded her where she came from and why she spoke the way she did. One day, a group of students visited the cafe. They recognized her from the learning space and greeted her with respect. Other customers noticed. Whispers spread, but she stayed the same. She served tea, cleaned tables, and listened. The cafe owner once asked her if she planned to leave someday. She smiled and said she did not know. He nodded and said whatever path she chose, the cafe would always be proud of her. News of the learning space eventually reached some of the experts from the first night. A few of them attended quietly, sitting at the back. They listened more than they spoke. One of them later admitted that night in the cafe had changed how he taught. He said he now asked his students how words lived in their homes, not just in books. That was enough for her. Years passed gently. The waitress grew older, wiser, but still humble. The learning space grew too, never large, never loud. It remained what it was meant to be, a place for understanding, not performance. The tycoon stepped back slowly, trusting others to carry the work forward. When asked about his greatest achievement, he never mentioned wealth or projects. He spoke about one evening in a cafe, when a quiet voice reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. As for the waitress, she never thought of herself as special. She believed anyone could have spoken that night if they listened to their heart. But she also understood that courage often arrived without warning, and when it did, it had to be honored. On a calm evening, much like the first one, she stood behind the cafe counter, watching people talk, laugh, and share stories. The air smelled of tea and bread. The walls held years of memories. She realized then that life had not given her a new role. It had simply allowed her to become more fully herself. And sometimes that was more than enough.